Welcome back to the latest installment of the Run to Daylight podcast, Best Ball Study Hall. I am your host, Todd Burrows. And for the second time today, I am live. And this time I am going to be joined by Biplap Mandel. Bip is one of the best players on the FFPC, and we have competed against each other a lot. I thought it's so interesting that you podcast for a number of reasons. And one is I like to meet people, and I like to meet my competition, and I like to learn from my competition. And we're going to get Bip in here in a minute. We're going to learn a lot about him. He's a very high volume player, very, very solid drafter. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know him. First, I want to talk about my friends over at Underdog. You can go to underdogfantasy.com. We're mostly going to be talking about FFPC because that's where Bip plays the most. But you can check out my podcast from earlier today where I did a live Underdog draft. I am going to probably do about 100 puppies. And I'm hoping to fill out and do 150 of the best ball manias. And we've done a lot of pods on that, and we will continue to do so. And you would say, man, in the old days, we used to do mock drafts, right? And it was so frustrating because people didn't take them seriously, and it really didn't help you get ready for your season. You just did it because you love to draft. Well, once best ball came along, I became addicted. I always call best ball the one-night stand of fantasy sports. I just don't have it in me to grind 150 season-long teams. But I can knock out 500 best ball teams and then just sit back and relax or play, do DFS on a Sunday. It's set it and forget it. Go to underdogfantasy.com. If this is the first time you've heard of Underdog and you're just crawling out from under the rock, sign up with the code BESTBALL and you will receive a match on your first $100. I don't know why my color has been going in and out these two podcasts, but, maybe it'll make me handsome. It couldn't hurt at this point. Anyway, let me bring in the Bip. And how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Todd, how are you?
I'm
good
good
to meet you and chat with you in person.
Absolutely. So, the first time I remember you is we were both in one of Scott Fish's leagues.
SFP.
I forget what it was called, but I just had one of those amazing seasons and I crushed it. But everyone told me, "Oh, you're in with Bip. He's really good." And I think you won either the year before or you won your league or so. I don't remember, but I remember people telling me how great you were. And then, as you know, when you're in drafts, you see certain people all the time and you get a sense of whether they know what they're doing or not. And you certainly do. So it's a great pleasure to finally meet you. And tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, about how old you are, and how long have you been playing fantasy football?
Yeah, no, thanks for making a humble introduction. I don't think I'm yet one of the best players, but I certainly do good. And I certainly like meeting competitors and understanding their ways of playing, right? One thing I wanted to mention, Scottish Bowl, that's where I think I just got lucky getting in one of those years and I finished overall fifth and have never played that again since then. So I look at that as probably being lucky with best ball drafting that year. Regarding me, I'm 39 years old, going to be 40 next year. So I think I'm entering that territory of getting lots of gray hair. But I work as a global IT director. I run a team across the world, handle millions of dollars of portfolio, and what we do is software consulting and implementations. And my strength area always has been strategy, building teams, solving problems, and some of that, coming from a highly stressful job, some of that strategies really helped me in fantasy football. And it more started as a hobby, but I've become more serious player in recent years. I come from India, grew up there, so a lot of focus on education and degrees, but happy to be here living in Minnesota last 12 years. So that's been my journey.
Cool. So how long have you been playing on the FFPC? What are some of your best finishes there? And about how many teams do you play in each contest?
Yep. So I have actually, to be honest, I have not been a fantasy football player for long. I've been playing last 11 years because that's the longest I've stayed in a country. My past is I used to be a global consultant and live all over the world, and every 6 9 months change countries. It's Minnesota where I found, I think, the right job that I was looking for, and have ever since stayed there. And funnily, I got into fantasy football through work, right? Where you pull in contests. And in 2011 or 12, I think I won the league in my first attempt, not knowing anything about football. So then I got serious and I'm like, I can do this. So my journey then started with FFPC, where I bought a fire sale dynasty team at half the price, and I'm still in that league. It's 501, very renowned league, lots of good players in it. But that's how the journey started, and then every year, I got into more different types of competitions there. And what has been unique, I noticed, is that I've finished every year with a positive ROI. So then instead of cashing out, I just reinvest that back and look for bigger laurels. My journey, it's been a bit lucky. I won the DFWC World Championship, I think, in 2015. That's
Which one?
the DFWC Dynasty Football World Championship. That's run by Scott Atkinson team. So I won that overall in 2015. That made me even get bolder with fantasy football, knowing I can do it. And then in recent years, last 2 years, I've had top 10 finishes in the main event, and I've also finished 12th overall in Football Guys last year. So it makes me a little nervous getting into this year because last 2 years have been tremendous. I think last year I cashed in probably first time ever six figures in total wins at FFPC, and my fear is at some point law of averages kick in and I'll get my butt kicked.
Henry says that he won the DFWC Dynasty Championship the year before.
Yeah.
So you're back-to-back champs, and now I'm gonna mute Henry. Get it, Henry? Mute him.
Henry is awesome.
Yeah, I've never met Henry. I should have Henry on. Henry, you want to come on sometime?
Yeah, real life story. Okay, Henry Moto used to worship Des Bryant, and he'll say yes, and that prompted me actually to draft Des Bryant 1.1 overall the year I won DFWC. So true story.
That's interesting. So let's see. So that's very impressive because the FFPC is very heavy rake, right? It's not an easy, site to be profitable year in and year out as you chase these championships. I love the FFPC, but the main reason I love the best ball so much is the rake is more in line with other sites. Rather than the rest of what goes on at the FFPC. And to be fair, it's not just the FFPC. Pretty much every season-long site has similar rakes, right? So if you want to play for a big prize, there's a price to be paid for that. And certainly in this day and age, there's a price to be active in every state. So I get it. But it's still very impressive that with that, you've been able to be profitable. So let's start. I mean, you mentioned to me before we came on that best ball is something you're still learning. So let's focus mainly on your season long. I don't want to get into dynasty because I don't do much dynasty anymore, and I'm not up on the top strategies. But let's talk about your season-long drafts. And you mentioned how your job affects the way that you play. Can you give me some specific examples of how your job interacts with fantasy football and helps you to be better?
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, and regarding best balls, I'm if so
I
while
think I
I'm
have the best balls,
yeah,
but
you do have.
most people won't take a look. So I don't, it's just a personal opinion.
Right, right. Yeah, and for me, it's important to stay interested in something that I'm doing well, right? And if I break down my ROIs, I don't think I'm positive on best balls. I come in positive overall, and that's why I realize I have a lot to learn and figure out, how I draft and do those. So coming to my job, and I think I've stated this before in some podcasts, my job involves strategies, and I'm heavily into stock markets and cryptos. I'll stop there, and not go into those details. But what I always love doing as a concept is buy low, sell high, right? And be flexible. I think I have met drafters and people, who will be sometimes stubborn about people they love, and they wouldn't change that opinion, and that's okay. But then you succeed or fail with those players. I've always been a flexible player. Now, what I do, I think one of my strengths is
What's some of your favorite stretches to do before you draft? You said you're very flexible.
yes. So
You,
when I
you,
s-
you didn't get that joke.
I
What
didn't.
are some of your favorite stretches because you're flexible? Sorry,
Right,
go ahead.
right, right. Now I got it. You're funny. Um.
I
So when
am,
I
but looks aren't everything.
so when I get into a draft, I do not go with a preconceived mindset that these are the players I'm going to draft, or I'm going RB, receiver,
All right, but
or whatnot.
let me back up a
Yeah,
second. How many main events do you typically do? How many football guys do you typically do?
awesome. So last year and this year, last year I did around 12 main events. I'm probably doing 15 main events this year.
Well,
Football.
if you won 100K, right?
Yeah, total. I mean, it's not the total profit, but yeah, that's what came back to the account. And then
Gotcha.
uh, I'm probably going to end up, because I plan lower, but I end up higher. I was planning around 24 football guys, but I wouldn't be surprised if I end up with 30, right? But that's my limit. I don't hire anybody to do my waivers. I do it myself, and so it gets to the painful part of the season, right, where you need to sit on top of your waivers. And I'm not one of those who will give up on my worst team. I will still go and do waivers there, because I feel that's the ethics of playing fantasy football, and not ignoring those teams, right?
I
So
agree.
so that's kind of, and then on top of that, I probably have 15 dynasties to manage and play through. But
Do you
dynasties are a
play
grind.
daily fantasy during the season,
No,
DraftKings?
I'm terrible at that, worse than best ball. So I'm easy money if anyone sees me
Well,
in
no,
DFS.
I mean, because to be good at that, you have to spend, 5-10 hours minimum during the week.
Right.
And, and it all kind of, again, I'm going to be 60 this year. I probably have about half the energy I used to have for this kind of stuff.
Right.
Now, I used to have more energy than the average guy. I never played more than 5 or 6 fantasy teams until the last couple years. COVID year, I think I did 40 managed leagues,
Right.
and I won't plus playing daily fantasy, and I won't say it nearly killed me, but it certainly didn't expand my lifespan. And so I just wanted to kind of get that. So um, I wanted to get some background on that before you talk more about, because the amount. Okay, finish what you were saying, and then I'll ask another question.
No, I was talking about, my approach to draft, and often, Todd, sounds simple, but my approach is best player available. But what I pay attention to, am I RB heavy, receiver heavy? Where are the tight ends? For example, this year tight ends will probably fall off pretty fast, from a tiering standpoint, right? So I need to pay attention there. And then slowly, uh, I think a part of it, like you said, was the COVID influence. Working from home, you go crazy, and so I got into these slow drafts, right, which kind of helps you, do something else in this lockdown life, right? So what happens then truly is through the season you start forming some targets, like fifth round this year, you'll see Hawkinson is falling towards 5.9, 5.10, 5.11 kind of zone, both in main events and football guys. So that's a target for me if I'm at the back end of the draft, right? If I'm on the front end of the draft, I'm probably looking at Ertz or Goddard coming back to me in the sixth round, right? So then you think about, okay, if that's your tight end target, where do you load up your receivers? Because I was hearing, I saw the other day Fantasy Mojo tweet that last year, while teams who had RB starts were more successful, why are people taking more receivers this year? One reason I see is a lot of RBs in last 5 years that you take in first round or second round have busted out, right? A lot of the 1.1s have never finished 1.1. That probably is making, and the week 14 bye is probably making people not take Jonathan Taylor 1.1. I'm seeing a lot of Christian McCaffrey's going 1.1 in some of these FBGs and main events, right? So that's kind of my high level approach. And then I'm
Let me
always looking
interrupt
for
for
the
a
best.
second, because you mentioned tight end.
Yeah.
And, I was in the best ball tournament, and 11 of the 12 teams that made the finals had Mark Andrews, right? Um, but you make it sound like you don't feel the need to take much of Travis Kelce, Waller, Kittle, and Andrews this year. Now, I love Goddard and I like Hawkinson a lot too, so I'm not disagreeing with you. But, in best ball, I definitely want a mix of all of them.
Yeah.
But if you do, let's say you do 50 managed leagues, right? How many of them will have a premier tight end?
So what do you call premier? Where does your premier tier fall?
The top, top 3 rounds.
Yeah, top 3 rounds. I would say if I'm doing 50 teams, less than 10 teams will probably have Kelsey, Andrews. I actually have only one share of Kittle this year from redrafts. I'm avoiding Kittle. I need to see that offense. Lance is starting. His legs will be uh, involved unless Debo got traded. I'm not going to Kittle this year, and maybe I'll get burnt with that. But that's what I'm doing. And
I'm the same way, by the way.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel like, what you just said, but on top of it, see, in best ball, Kittle can go 40 one week and 8 the next. And if you get a good second tight end, you don't feel the the pain. In season long, spike weeks are not as attractive during the regular season because you have to make the playoffs to get
correct.
into the tournament. And a guy who's inconsistent like Kittle is, that's why I wouldn't draft much. I'll draft a little bit more of him in best ball, and I'm not doing much. I don't think you're getting the discount on Kittle that and I think Goddard's my favorite because I think
Yep.
he's priced right around where he was last year when Ertz was on the roster, but Ertz is gone. You also have AJ Brown there, who is going to make it harder to double cover Goddard.
Exactly.
And okay, good.
Yep. And then just it's not that I don't like Andrews and Kelsey. I'll take them at 212 if someone leaves them for me. But the point is, it's the overall roster construction. So I really like Eckler.
And that's what's great about the FFPC is
correct.
That's why I like having different players on, because there really isn't a right and a wrong way to do it, but there's the way that you like to do it that has worked out best for you.
Yeah, and I just like the value. I mean, I'm not building a mathematical model, but I'm pretty sure if you build a model, it's also what is your opportunity cost of taking a Kelsey, Andrews, versus a Davante Adams or Najee Harris, right? So you always have to think that way. And then, you know, I am also
and
looking
it
for
ties
players.
into and it ties into what each of us is good at, right?
y- y-
So I'm good at finding later running backs,
Yep,
right? I'm
yep,
good at seeing situations other people don't. You know, we just had this big discussion on Twitter about Antonio Gibson.
yeah.
Everyone sees this guy who has McKissick and Robinson there, and he keeps dropping. I see a guy who's going to get 200 carries and has a floor of 40 catches. And I say, people underestimate the value of having a guy like, not everybody who's on your roster has to win you the championship.
Absolutely, and your team will look very different, right, when the waivers hit and you do a lot of things. But you know, one strategy I'll tell you I'm trying to implement. So I'm avoiding Andrews because I want Bateman later, and here is the opportunity. If Andrews gets hurt, now what do you do? Bateman is probably getting 30-35% of the target share if Andrews gets hurt, right? That could win you a tournament if Bateman is your fourth receiver, right? So I'm looking at who are the other players, what's the opportunity cost of someone getting hurt on that team, right? And how the offenses evolve. I just feel more comfortable without taking a tight end in the first round. I feel my team is strong
Yeah,
enough
and
for
and,
first
and I
few
don't think
weeks.
there's,
Yeah.
like I said, I don't think there's a right and a wrong way.
Right,
It's but I don't think anyone ever went broke taking a value who ends up being top 4 or 5, right?
right,
So if
right.
you get the seventh, eighth tight end, and they give you the third, and they end up the third or fourth best tight end with both Hawkinson and Goddard can, you know, it is like you said, it's how much better is your guy versus the guy that was
Yeah.
left, right?
Like
Um,
last year, the teams of mine that did well had Schultz in it, right? Schultz was consistent, and you hardly paid anything
and
for
he,
him. Yeah,
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 exactly. And I
yeah.
had none, so um, yes. So I do want to ask you about exposure in the first 2 rounds. Obviously, it's not the same as best ball where you can get 100 teams,
Yep.
you know, because you have to manage them. If you have 50 teams, what's the most you want of guys in the first and second round for season long percentage wise?
Yep, and it probably comes down where you draft, because like I was saying, I will not reach for a player. I think, you know, just to talk to you about some of my likes, I am starting to prefer, and I'm from Minnesota, Justin Jefferson over, say, Cooper Cup or Jamar Chase. So if I'm in the first half, I'm even,
He's my clear number one wide receiver.
yeah.
So
So
we
even
agree again.
Yeah, so if I'm drafting 1.2, like I just started a main event. I took Justin Jefferson over Christian McCaffrey. Again, I wanted the receiver value there, and I went zero RB there, and I think took my first running back in round 6. But anyways, Justin Jefferson in the first half. I'm looking for Najee Harris in the second half. You know, Dalvin Cook, I'm good if he's falling 1.10 to 1.12 zone, right? Davante Adams, you know, I prefer him slightly over Diggs. Not big difference. So those are some players, you know, I'm really
But
trying to take.
percentage wise, where do you start drawing the line? And even though they might be the top guy in your board, like I always say in best ball, I don't want more than
Yep,
15% of anybody in the first and second round, because the win rates in best ball in the first 2 rounds,
yep,
when a guy gets hurt, it plummets, right?
yep, yep,
In season long, you can make it up uh, by maybe handcuffing the guy, by
yep.
uh, even though people hate that even in season long, but you still have a chance if. But where do you draw the line and say I can't take any more of a guy in the first 2 rounds?
Yeah, these guys I named, I'm not going to draw a line. For example, I'm comfortable if I have 10% Cup and 30% Justin Jefferson. So that's a 20% gap between those two guys, right? So with receivers, I'm more comfortable, Todd, like Justin Jefferson or Cooper Cup, Jamar Chase. Right now, I will draw lines. People like Austin Eckler, I don't want him in more than 10% or 12% of my teams. I have zero Derrick Henry this year. I'm just fading him. It is what it is. Let him burn me if he wants to burn me. Right. So
Any
that's
night.
And he might, right?
And
So
season long, I am much more willing to do what you're talking
yeah,
about.
yep,
Especially, I mean, even I'm not going to be doing more than. I mean, I have got two main events that I draft and someone else manages. I've
sure.
got I did the hardway draft FBG. I've got one more FBG credit, and I know that I'll probably do two or three more leagues,
Sure.
but that's it. I mean, I'm only going to be doing 3 or 4
Yep.
managed leagues this year
Yep.
because I feel it gives me a lot better chance of being good. Best ball's where I'm trying to win a tournament.
Yeah. No, you are right. And again, it depends on the goals, right? I think what is also happening is the best balls today probably don't compare anywhere. I mean, unless you are playing underdog, the best ball mania doesn't compare close to prize money that you may get at a football guys um, or main event. Now, this is where the difference kicks in, Todd. Where I think I'm good at is playing the waiver. Like again, I'm not one of those guys who will go in week one and splash $900 on Elijah Mitchell. That happened last year in multiple leagues. I'm again applying my concept of buy cheap, try to look 2 rounds ahead and see who may become relevant, and just keep money. Now, many will disagree. They want to spend money up front, but where the bye weeks have gone and where the injuries have gone, I think saving money helps you in the later part of the season because someone or the other
I
does
think it
evolve.
depends
Right?
on who's there,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Like last year, everyone spent on Elijah Mitchell, and that turned out to work good.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yep.
that was week 3, week 4, something
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
Right. Or maybe even sooner.
And where I disagree there, though, is yes.
Well, let me just finish that one thought. I think it's human nature, and it's one of the big edges, is people look at, I just had an argument with Josh Larkey, and I've had arguments with the RotoViz guys. And my argument isn't with their point. A lot of times I agree with their point. They're looking at last year's stats or sometimes 2 years, and they're drawing conclusions and drafting according to it. But, where to spend the money, it really depends on who's there. Like a couple years ago, everyone spent heavy on James Robinson, and he turned out to be and then there was nobody the rest of the year who got close. So if you spent your money early, you made the right choice. Last year, it was Elijah Mitchell. It really depends on when the main injury happens. The thing about doing it early is a lot of times is that because we've been drafting since May or June, but right before week 1, that's when the most guys who are replacing injured players for the whole year are going to be there.
Yep. No, that's fair. The way what has worked for me as a strategy is it's still a grind, right? I mean, where I disagree with doing that and feel uncomfortable is standing week 1. You don't know how long Elijah Mitchell will last, and he's a running back, and then you spend $900. And then later, if he got hurt or something happened, now you are beaten in the waivers. So I in the teams where I am relevant,
I love saving
and I'm
money
winning
myself.
Yes, because it's like an insurance hedge, right? Now you come into your championship knockout week, and I feel comfortable going into that week having money because then I can go grab any hot commodity from the market or even block something. I have blocked quarterbacks last year for some teams because I needed the win. So there's a lot of way it may play out, but you are right. It ultimately depends who got hurt and who's available. And now we have
and also what your strength is.
Yes.
Right? And most analysts don't talk like this because you get followers by saying absolute statements, right?
Yes.
To me, learning your own, like people say to me, well, you're too risk averse because of your best ball exposure theory. And I've come to the conclusion I'm not as smart as I think I am, right? So I don't want to guess who's going to be the best players more than 15%. because I'm wrong too often, right?
Yep.
But I'm also right plenty. So building something that fits your style of play is important. Now, I want to go back to some of these comments that we've
Sure.
gotten. Henry said, I was one of those 12 with Mark Andrews. Yep, and neither of us won. But I got him in the 4th round. We all did last year. That's why I was buying so much Mark Andrews. And that's another thing. People are so headstrong on what they saw last year.
Right.
Like I'm drafting a ton of Dak Prescott this year. Why? Because last year everyone was talking about him being a top 3 quarterback.
Yep.
Coming off a major injury. Now he loses Cooper, but he's on his second. And we heard how he was throwing wrong last year, that it was, his calf got hurt. Well, now he's in the 7th round, 8th round of best ball. And God knows where he goes in FBGs. So I think, being able to see, that's one of my strengths, seeing where people are over enthusiastic or under enthusiastic, and they're so set on making big Twitter posts that they can miss things. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's two worlds, right? I think, okay, many analysts may hate me saying that, but I think if there were consistent, it's one part to be analysts and one part to be playing it, right? So if you take all the high stake players and analysts, I think the players are going to crush.
As I say, come see me in a draft room. Guys who say that I'm terrible, come see me in a draft room.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm terrible. I'm terrible. Come see me in a draft room. I won't mind. I'll look forward to it.
Yeah. So my thought is, but there are some good analysts out there.
Absolutely.
I think you
and
look
most
at
of them don't talk shit.
Yeah, you look
because
at
they know what it takes to be a good player.
Correct. You take the draft shark guys, Jared, Matt, Kevin, they are really good. Adam, they are really good, right? You take the RotoViz guys, they practice what they preach. They are really good, right? But like you said, not all analysts will make the cut, right? Like Dynasty, I learned Dynasty from Shane Hallam. That guy, I hope someday he makes it big. He posts all this free content.
He was on my podcast a bunch, and I'll have him back in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, he is such a good analyst who drafts, and most of the time
he's also really good at Dynasty.
Yes, and I'm talking Dynasty, and so I've learned a lot from him, how to evaluate rookies or look at his rankings. And I'll tell you, his rankings sometimes are better than paid sites where they do Dynasty rankings, right? So I'm just giving you an example. So ultimately, for people like me who's a non-analyst and doesn't understand the technicalities of the game, I now have my favorites that I look at, right? And I think I'm successful going by some of their tips and strategies. So my playbook is simple. Keep doing that, right?
Yeah.
But you are right. Yeah.
How do you manage waiver wire with so many teams? You don't. It's like, how do you run a marathon? I don't know. Yeah. I can't do it. So the best thing is don't try and run a marathon if you can't run a marathon. Chase's playoff schedule is a little scary. Still may be great, but may have a lower playoff ceiling. True. But he also has I think the Patriots are beatable. And, Buffalo has a great offense. But I do think that week 17 is a little Mad Sox also said, laugh out loud, Henry rumbles for 50 at home versus Houston in week 16. That's why in best ball, I'm going to be a little overweight on Henry.
Yep.
I already said I like Dak. I like CeeDee Lamb. It doesn't make sense for me to fade Henry. If I have 10% Henry, my leverage on that is the 90% of teams where I don't have Henry.
Yep. Yeah, and it's different, right? In best ball, you don't get a chance to pick up someone from waiver. It's drafted and it's done, right? Whereas in managed, you have so many ways to recover, right? And who knows what happens in playoffs. I still feel Chase is a special talent, no matter. I'm not going to worry about
week waiting to happen.
Yeah, I'm not going to worry about week 17 right now. If I'm there and I'm relevant, that's great.
Well, for the contest that we're talking about, it's week 15, 16, and 17.
Correct.
Right? It's not just, so that's more of a best ball concern to me.
That's true. Yeah, that's
Right? You
true.
know,
You don't have a waiver.
and the
Yeah.
first thing they teach you in fantasy football school, or they should, is know your scoring,
Yep.
right? And sometimes people will question me and say, "Well, why do you have so much ownership on you know, like last year, it didn't work out, but Eckler and Chubb were basically the same ADP on both. Was it Chubb? But they were it was Eckler and a guy who was a real touchdown guy. Well, it turned out Eckler ended up getting touchdowns, but the
Yep.
point is you can play on different sites with different scoring systems, and you can get your, you know, like I'm much more likely to take Eckler on FFPC than I am on Underdog because of the full PPR. You know, and that gets me away from the touchdown variance he had so good with last year.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
who are some guys in the middle rounds that you really like, Bib?
So you mean maybe like 8 to 12? You're
No,
referring
let's do let's do fourth to 10, fourth to
fourth.
9.
Yeah, yeah, 4th to 9. So fourth round, some of my targets this year is Cortland Sutton, right? Marquise Brown. I think there's conflicting opinions out there about Marquise Brown, but I really, really like both of them in the fourth round, and they'll probably be my receiver 3 or receiver 2 or receiver 4 sometimes if I've started zero RB. So those are, I mean, I'm taking both of those guys before Terry McLaurin now, and even sometimes Deontay Johnson. I'm taking these two over them, right? Fifth round, my favorite right now is Gabriel Davis by far, and his ADP keeps climbing. I'm happy that I've done some of these early drafts. If 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 this continues, he may be creeping into mid fourths. By the time we get to September in some of these leagues, right? But Gabriel Davis, Rashad Bateman, those are some of my targets in the fifth round. Sixth
Hold on
round,
one sec.
yeah.
So, say those two names again.
Uh, Gabriel Davis,
Yeah, I don't get Gabriel Davis. I just don't. What was the other name?
Rashad Bateman.
Okay, so Bateman, that to me is a situation that screams Will Fuller or Julio Jones, right? Like I could see them, going through the first week or two of camp, trying to do it with Duvernay, and then who's going to be our third wide receiver. Well, we don't like him. We don't like them.
Sure.
So I like to buy players when they're going to be the cheapest. So a guy like Hollywood Brown, who's been one of my most owned wide receivers over each of the last 2 years, because he'd go in the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th round.
Yep.
I'm much less interested in the third round because Hopkins is only out 6 games, right?
Sure.
Kyler's kind of a little bitch, and didn't get his contract, so that scares me. And I think that people, as we get closer to, like I was drafting the hell out of McLaurin and DJ Moore the last month, right? Now, because what I thought would happen happened. They'd get a better quarterback in Carolina, and McLaurin would sign a contract or get traded, and you'd have more certainty.
Yep.
Well, now Amari Cooper and Chris Godwin have dropped again. Yep. And because there's uncertainty there, so I'm buying those guys now, and I'm hoping, that Bateman, Bateman's a guy I think could get cheaper if you get a Will Fuller there. So that's why I dabble, but I'm not overweight right now.
Yep. No, I am all into Bateman in FFPC leagues in mid 5th to late 5th if he's there, because again, unlike the best ball, if you look at ADPs on main event or football guys this year, it's going very, very receiver heavy in first 4 or 5 rounds, right? In fact, the other day, Antonio Gibson made it to 6.12 in FFPC. Think about Gibson with Jonathan Taylor now on that team with 4 stacked receivers, right? And you get a tight end there, right? So I feel some of the running backs are now getting discounted, which interests me in them in 6th round. Like I'm seeing Elijah Mitchell, Antonio Gibson in 6th round, right? And Clyde and Sanders are falling into 7th or late 7th, right? So that's what I'm watching. But Cortland Sutton, Marquise Brown, Gabriel Davis, Rashad Bateman, and TJ Hawkinson late 5th. He's consistently going there are some of my targets. And then when I look at my final team, I feel very good. Like, I've had teams where I started Justin Jefferson, Mike Evans, right? Keenan Allen or someone like that in 3rd round, or Etienne maybe, and then 4th round I get a Cortland Sutton and Marquise Brown and put in a TJ Hawkinson. I really like my start on paper right now. I feel much comfortable going in and managing waivers with that start in a Football Guys or a main event today.
What's your quarterback strategy in those leagues?
I will prefer stacking, but I'm not going to reach for stacking. Let's put it that way, right?
But what I mean is, how many do you normally take, and when do you take them?
Yeah, I typically like taking 2 quarterbacks unless I have Josh Allen, then pretty much I'm more comfortable just rolling with one. But when you're spending $1,500, it's better to go with 2 quarterbacks. But I will take one before 10th round, sometimes even in 8th round, and then I'm not taking one quarterback until late. And I'm probably even okay taking a Tua or Trevor Lawrence with this top guys, just thinking if they break out. I may even take Zach Wilson, worst case I cut them, right? But that's kind of my strategy. Now, sometimes I've even waited late and taken Derek Carr as my quarterback 1, but then I'm probably having Davante Adams and Waller and Renfro on the team and just go full stack there.
Yeah. So my thoughts on it, is that ideally, especially this early, it's taking one quarterback and just taking that extra dart throw, because there's always quarterbacks on waivers.
Yep.
In Football Guys and main events.
Yep.
That being said, when you're in a tough room and you get to the 15th, 16th round, and you're like, well, I don't want another quarterback. Well, this happened in the hard way a couple years ago. I had taken Kyler probably too early in like the 6th round. And it was like the 16th round, and I'm staring at a bunch of guys, nobody I had any passion for.
Yep.
And I took Lamar Jackson. Right.
Yes.
And so, again, there are rules, and it's not wrong to have rules.
Yep.
But you also need to know when to break your rules.
Yep.
Right. Because ultimately what you're trying to do with every team in every format is to put the most value that you can on your team.
Exactly.
The other question I have, something I like to do, I tend in Football Guys and main events is to go 1 or 2 running backs. Now this year, again, it's different because, running backs have fallen so much more.
Yep.
But, and then I like, painting the board yellow and purple for a while.
Yep.
Taking my first quarterback. And I like to, this is a RotoViz thing. I like to win the flex with wide receivers. So typically through 8 rounds, I will often have 2 running backs, 4 wide receivers, a tight end, and a stud quarterback.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That not every draft, but like if you said to me beforehand, how important, because as Danny Muller would say, people underestimate how important it is to have your starters.
Yep.
Right. Early guys, people who I see people sometimes start 7 wide receivers. Well, dude, only 4 of them you're only going to be able to play 4 of them. Right. Yep. So that means every week it's not like best ball where you get the highest score.
Yep.
You're going to physically have to take your 5th or 6th or 7th round draft pick and put them on your bench.
Yep.
Is that how you like to do it? To make sure that you filled out your starting team before you go too heavily into backups? Or is that not something that you think much about?
No, I think that's what is going on with me. So I would go top 10 rounds. That's how I think you said 8, which is similar to yours. So in my 10th through
right.
10th round,
by the end of the 10th round, I want my full a quarterback, tight end, 4 wide receivers, and a second running back.
Yeah. So my preference this year in top first 10 rounds is 5 receivers, 3 running backs, a tight end, and a quarterback, right? That's my stack of 10, right? Because I really like the receivers, even going down to Christian Kirk, who at or a Devontae Smith or a Hunter Renfro as my receiver 4 or 5 sometimes I'm doing. Running backs, the other thing, my preference start is in first 2 rounds having a running back, not 2 running backs. But I'm also comfortable with 0 RB this year, right? So that's what I'm doing. I've sometimes started 0 RB and in 4th round taken David Montgomery. I'm fine with that start and then filling it up later.
Who are some of the guys that you think are most overpriced on the board right now?
So a lot of people will disagree with this, but I think Jalen Hurts, he's started going before Burrow, before a lot of players, quarterbacks I like he's going top 5 quarterback in some drafts. I don't agree with that. That's me. Again, it may burn me, but people are going for that. So I think he is overpriced. I told you about Kittle. I think Kittle is overpriced, right? I am trying to avoid him. You may not agree, but redrafts, I think Derrick Henry is overpriced. But that's my opinion.
I'm much less likely to take Henry in redraft than I am in best ball.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm avoiding him
in best ball. Those 40-point weeks are just friggin' gold.
Yep. Yep. No, that's totally, yeah. And you don't have waivers, right, to recover from that in best ball. But those are some players, I'm receivers.
I agree with most of those.
Yeah.
I think that those are, I'm a big one on archetypes.
Yep.
Okay. So last year I loved Hurts as an archetype running quarterback that people were down on because he might not be good.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
This year, Justin Fields is the archetype of a quarterback who is going to run, who is falling because people don't think he's good.
Yep.
Right. So that's the guy that last year Hurts was one of my most owned guys. This year, if I don't have a stack with Philadelphia guys, or you can also put them with Saints for week 17 in best ball. If I don't, he's just not a guy that I'm just taking. There's too many guys right after him that I really like Dak, Russell Wilson.
Well, same with me, same. And I know a lot of folks will disagree, but Hurts is just climbing the ADP and I want nothing to do with him. I'm just not sure if he's going to give you the ROI. I can see Russell Wilson breaking off, with those weapons he has. And then, under the cover, people don't give Tim Patrick a lot of credit, right? But he is the receiver 3 on that team. They still have KJ Hamler getting.
And he could be the receiver 2 or 1 on that team.
Yeah. You look at the weapons and then you see Javonte Williams there, right? And I'm by the way, he's a player I'm really high on. I just forgot mentioning him.
I think Javonte Williams will be back closer to the first round come the start of, when people are in Vegas.
Yeah.
I think Javonte Williams will be at that 1-2 turn, just like he was. I'm taking a lot of him in the 3rd round.
And Vegas this year will be interesting because the Thursday night game, Vegas will be interesting this year because the Thursday night game has Bills versus Rams and it's going to be high scoring. So all these ADPs are going to be really blown up. For example, if Allen Robinson has a big game, I can see someone taking him top 15 or top 20, in Vegas, right? So it'll be really interesting ADP evolution, post Thursday night game, how Vegas reacts. So I'm looking forward to that.
And thinking about what could happen, how people will overreact.
Yep.
That is, that being more like a sumo wrestler.
Right.
is a good way to, I just thought of that, in fantasy football, having a low center of gravity. The news hits you, but you don't flop too much either way. And again, all these guys moved up. Well, who moved down because they moved up? I wasn't drafting much Godwin because of the injury, and I thought we're getting enough of a discount. I got him at 6'11" on a a best ball mania.
Yep.
And I already had McCaffrey, Fournette, and DJ Moore, and someone took Brady too early, but I came back and I got Baker Mayfield in like the second to last round.
Sure.
Amari Cooper, again, another guy who just falling because we don't know what's going on. People hate uncertainty. And
Amari Cooper, I have a personal grudge though. Every time I wanted him, he's burnt me. Yeah, kind of that kind of a scenario.
Is one of those guys.
He just vanishes when I need him. He vanishes when I need him.
Yep. You know who was like that for me? Anquan Bolden. Anquan Bolden was one of those guys, Fred Taylor was another one.
Yep.
All the way back. If I drafted Fred Taylor, that was the year he got hurt.
So you remember the year, right, when Amari Cooper was not doing well with the Raiders, and I had the balls to bench him week 7 in a main event, and he went off with 219 yards. That game you remember with Kansas City, and so that was the nail on my coffin. And I'm like, I'm never Cooper. And even 2 years back, when I had the chance at a shot at a main event, I finished 5th overall. Cooper was in my starting lineup, and he shit on the bed, And so I'm
that's why I love best ball, because I don't have to pick.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
I don't have to pick when guys like that go off.
So I'm trying to avoid Amari Cooper, but the other day I saw him go at 7.1 in a league, right, where someone finally took him. So
and you can take, I'm taking shots on, I kick myself because I drafted a lot of early best ball, and I took 1 or 2 Tom Brady's in the 20th.
Sure.
And I remember talking to both my partners, Billy Musio and Shane Hollum, like, we need to take, and every time we would get there, they'd be like, "Oh, this isn't the team for 20th round Brady." I'm like, "It's the 20th round. What do you mean?" If he plays, any draft is a great draft to have.
Do you think Gronk comes back? What's your opinion?
I think that there's a very good chance that he comes back around week 10.
Yep.
I think he saw what Antonio Brown did 2 years ago.
Sure.
I think that he doesn't like playing, but he likes winning.
Yep.
And so if you could fast forward to week 10, play a few weeks, get there for the playoffs, get another ring. I mean, I would say that, put it this way. If I told you there was a 25% chance, right? Like if Gronk came out and said, there is an exactly 25% chance that I play, what round do you take him?
I'll probably take him after round 14 somewhere.
Right.
Yep.
So I think there's a 25% chance that Gronk comes back, and he's going in round 19 and 20.
Sure.
Right. So that's why that's where I wanted to, same thing with Deshaun Watson. Right.
Yep.
If I told you there was a 25% chance that Deshaun Watson was going to get a 10-game suspension, right?
Yep.
When would you draft him? Right?
Yep.
A lot, but he's one that I think is more like a 10% chance he gets 10 games.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I was reading somewhere that, I mean, it's a very dicey situation for NFL, but I was reading somewhere that it sounds like some of the body languages and from the judge who's doing his arbitration seems favorable for Watson. So I don't know what that means, but that's what I was reading somewhere. But it's and
Roger Goodell could still overrule her.
Correct, because of the type of allegation. It's in today's world, it's very difficult.
But what Goodell could do is, if she gives him 8 games, Goodell could make it 12.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I doubt he's going to just overrule her, and if she and say, "Oh, he's suspended indefinitely."
Yep.
I don't, because now he has cover, right?
Yep.
A lot of the reason that they punished these guys so harshly was because he had to make the decision, and they they hate the Ray Rice situation.
Correct.
Had
Yep.
made them look so bad that they erred on the other side.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And now, at least he has cover. So I think that, again, I'm more likely to draft Gronk than I am Watson.
Yep.
But I do think that if you take Amari Cooper on a discount in the 7th round,
yep,
it
might
makes,
as well.
this is one of the things that I've started doing more this year. And every year you want to learn something new.
Yep.
Like last year, I was fading Akers, but I also was fading Henderson.
Yep.
That makes no sense.
That probably didn't make sense.
Because what you want to do is, if you're right on a heavy fade, you want to leverage that as much as you can.
Right.
Right. Like this year, I like McCaffrey, 15%. Right. I'll take up to 15% McCaffrey. Well, what if he gets hurt? Well, I want 20% Donta Foreman.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I think that if you're going to take Cooper on a discount, adding Watson as a third quarterback in the FFPC where there's 20 rounds is just an absolute no-brainer, right?
Yep.
Take him in the 18th round if you want to make sure you get him.
Yep.
Your opportunity cost is almost nothing.
Yeah, and you can cut him. Always cut him, and get someone
not
else.
In a best
and not in best ball. Yeah, that
right.
makes sense.
Right.
But if you have 20 teams, and I mean, again, it's the leverage you can have, going contra on few of them. So
any other key strategies that you use, Bip, that we may not have covered?
No, I mean, then, the only thing I do in the later rounds, once I stack up my starters and feel good, because it's a managed leagues, is going all for ceiling. So second half of the draft, I think I'm drafting, say, for example, Jahan Dotson over Jarvis Landry, right? Or I'm taking, Rashad White is no longer going after 10 rounds, but I really like him as someone having high potential, in that offense if Fournette gets hurt. So I like Alec Pierce, right, later in the draft.
I'm up to like 14% of him in best ball.
Yeah, and so for me, the only other thing which after 12th round is all ceiling guys versus taking boring floor guys. If I really feel good about
best ball.
It probably changes in best ball, because in best ball, and the reason I've not been good is I think best ball, you need players like Deshaun Jackson, right? Who has high, who will blow up in a game but not show up in the other game. I think that gives you chance to maximize. And I just feel my analysis
is hugely important.
Yes, and I have not done that analysis. I don't have the time, and I think trying to draft for ADP is a wrong way to approach best ball, right? Because you need players like that. So that's where I think I've not been very successful in best ball. But I do them more as a hobby, right? Okay, nothing to do, don't want to manage the teams.
Just throw $125 best ball out there.
And try to come close to breaking even, right? I'll be happy if I break even.
Yeah, I and that's how I feel about season long. Right. Yes. I play it because I do enjoy it, but I don't put enough time into it to where I think I'm not, arrogant enough to think that I'm going to catch a Dave Hubbard or some of these guys who grind 150, but I could get lucky. And that's what you hope for.
It's a lot of work. Like, every Tuesday night, 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the night, I have the calendar booked just to sit and do waivers. Same thing you are doing on a Thursday or Friday. So, you have to commit to that. That's the that's the part of football. Not a lot of us.
And if I was 40 years old instead of 60, I probably would do both. Right. I mean, seriously, I just need more sleep now than I used to. And maybe if I'm trying to lose weight, maybe if I lose 100 pounds, maybe I'll find a gear I haven't had for a while.
Sure.
And I went through a divorce, but anyway.
But I like your teams. I think you have done Genesis and Revelations drafts. Probably I've seen you there. So, but here is the thing.
All right, here. Yeah. I'll let's do a fun exercise. I've done one draft, and it's the hard way, which is obviously, filled with just some of the best guys out there. Dwayne McFarland, Abib,
Sure.
Dave Hubbard,
Yep.
Austin Martin. I'm gonna pull up
A board.
my draft board for that, and I'm gonna let you look at it. That's a
Yep.
fun way to end this.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would love to learn.
Have you had Austin on the show? You should get him sometime.
He's been on the Hardway draft
Okay.
last year. Austin and I are very friendly. We don't DM as much as we did a couple years ago.
Right.
But I'm a big fan of Austin, and I asked him a couple times. Look, we were in so many leagues together.
Right.
He just didn't want to give me his secrets.
Secret, yeah.
And even last year, we did so many best balls together.
Right.
And it's funny because I was a best ball guy coming in to challenge those guys in season long, and I never had any qualms doing it.
Sure.
And I won't say I struggled. The first year of Hardway, I got to the finals. The second year, I wasn't very good. The third year, I had a really good team, and then injuries hit. But overall, I have not done as well in season long.
Sure.
And then they came to best ball, and I could just tell they thought they were going to wipe me out. And at least last year it didn't.
All right, here comes the board. So
right, give me a second. I'm going to make it bigger for you.
Yep.
So this is me.
Which one is you? Which team? Let me see.
Mark Andrews, first round.
Okay, team 5. Yep, I see that. Yep.
Hold on one second. All right. So this tends to be my strategy. I like a premier tight end.
Yep.
I like one running back, and then I paint yellow for a while.
Yep.
Then I worry about my second and third running backs.
That's pretty strong.
What's that?
Your second and third running backs are pretty strong.
Those are my favorite two values. I love Russ this year.
Yep.
And then, I think I did better. One of the weaknesses I had with these guys in the past is my second 10 picks. I think I did better this year.
Second 10, yep. Yeah, so you have Brian Robinson, who probably is one of my higher owned, whether I have Gibson or not, in the second half of the draft. So it seems like you took him.
And this was over a month ago. You mentioned
Tim Patrick.
Yeah, you mentioned Tim Patrick. He was my most owned wide receiver until he started moving up.
Sure. Yep. Well, he's still around that. Or maybe he's moved to the 11th round. I would.
Yeah, think. He's moved up about 2 rounds, and I took him ahead of ADP because in that league you have to take your guys you really want.
Yeah, and you did reach for Andrew. See, if I did this draft, I would have probably taken Jamar Chase at 5 and then come back Hawkinson in the 5th round, which is what we are discussing, right? Like I would feel Chase, Hawkinson, bit more comfortable than Andrews and Mooney. By the way, I'm taking a lot Mooney, so it worked out for you.
I almost took Kyle Pitts at 5, but he has that week 14 bye.
Okay.
And I knew Pitts wouldn't make it back to me, and I didn't think that any of the big guys would make it back to me here, but they did.
By the way, Pitts is now going towards the end of 2nd round or even early 3rd in the drafts I've seen right now.
You know what? I'm going to have to do an FBG then because
you should.
Yeah. I would take Pitts in the mid to late 2nd round every friggin' time.
Yeah, I'll send you a board maybe in last 2-3 days. I've done a football guys. You'll see the ADPs and you can compare how much some of these.
So what could I have done better here? Well, Andrews, and I agree.
It's not better, right? So if I may jump in, you followed my strategy, what I said, right? Which is how I think you do it. In 10 rounds, you want 3 running backs, and I am drafting Singletary and Penny later, right? So that's solid. I can take Fournette there, I can take Aaron Jones there, or whoever made it, right?
I would have taken. I wanted Jones to fall to me.
Yep.
And I wanted Barkley or Henry, and this is back when they were going in the 3rd round, but not with this group.
Yeah, so it's not better, but if I look at round 4, I would have taken Cortland Sutton over Allen Robinson because I look at him. But I know you are relying on Tim Patrick climbing up, right? So that's okay. You are
Exactly.
sticking to your philosophies. But the ADPs have changed so much. For example, Mike Williams is going now in late third, no longer fifth round, right?
Late what?
Late third, like
Oh
Mike
wow.
Williams.
His
Yeah, he's just
best ball, he's still going very late.
yeah, no, in these redrafts, that's what camp like Antonio Gibson, he's now going in sixth round. So the ADPs have changed. Yeah, I'll send you a board. I'll ping you on Twitter, and then you can look at it. Maybe you need to do one. So
Awesome.
yep. No, this is great. I mean, my only thing is, if Jamar Chase is still on the board, I am just not taking Kelsey or Andrews, but that's my bias, right? So that's who I would have
Well, I
taken probably
knew
in
that I
third.
could get a running back in the second and 4
Correct.
good wide receivers.
Yep.
So I like having a stud tight end.
Sure.
If this wasn't the hard way,
Sure.
where most drafts I go in and I just take the best player and I build my team as I go. The hard way, I found it's very important to have a strategy because
Yep.
it's a very running back heavy early. So I wanted to get one. I like getting a tight end, a running back, and a wide receiver in the top 3 rounds.
Right.
And
right.
and I wasn't sure that Waller would, and I didn't want Kittle,
Yep.
and I didn't think Waller would make it back. So I wanted, one of the top 3 guys. I knew Pitts wouldn't make it back. So,
Right.
I don't like taking the chance because this is not an ADP type of draft, right?
Right.
The
Absolutely.
hard way is like, who knows? It's early. We don't know what these guys are thinking. They're all good. You
Yep.
just can't sit around and wait for value. So
Yep.
I felt like getting my tight end, even though I was giving up value, helped me to draft better overall.
And end of the year, we may look and see how we were all wrong about Mark Andrews, and he finishes as tight end 1, and Bateman thing never happens, and he just has a better year, right?
If I knew that I could get Njoku and Higbee that late,
right,
I probably would have waited.
Waited, but it worked out well. I mean, if you look at, so if I were drafting, I would have had Jamar Chase and Hawkinson, whereas you have Andrews and Mooney. I don't think the gap is big.
I love Mooney.
Yeah, and I do too. We didn't talk about him, but 5th round, I like Mooney, along with the names I had mentioned. I'm probably taking Mooney over Bateman in some drafts too. So,
all right.
Yep.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you for joining me. It was a big pleasure. And maybe we'll draft together sometime.
No, thank you so much. And maybe what I'll do is, if you are doing any of the best balls soon, maybe I'll join that draft, knowing I'm not good, but I want to see what you are doing.
Well, we're in a few.
Learn something.
You can go back and look. We've already been in a few.
Yeah. No, I remember those.
But I would actually be interested in doing a football guys with you.
Yeah, let's do it. If you're doing another one, we can split that and do it. Just let me know. I think Fridays and Saturdays work best for me in the evening. If anything works, we can do it coming weekend. I'm all for it.
I will let you know. I'm definitely going to take Bip up on that. Thank you, Bip. Thank you, Underdog Fantasy. And we will talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Cheers.
Of course.
Bye.
It was really a pleasure getting to know you.
Same here. Talk to you soon. Bye.